I had really hard time prepping for this show.
When you're being able to chop off the character's limbs and then they come after you.
What do you think makes a good horror game?
What we really want to capture is this.
Dead Space. Did you guys know that game gonna be such a success?
When I went to the studio, I saw this secret project and it just blew me away.
Terrible, crazy, scary creatures.
I have 2 grade school kids. The computer turns off if they walk in the room.
The Callisto protocol, what made it so special?
We would use concept art to...
You just created unrealistic expectation for the entire industry. Tell me about the process of designing creatures. What about environments? How would 3D Sculpt help you? Hi, everyone. My name is Ninelle Anderson. I'm CEO of Devoted Studios, and I'm your host at Devoted SpeakEasy.
Hi.
Tonight, we're going to have an amazing and different topic. We're going to be talking about art of creating horror art. Dumb! I had really hard time prepping for this show because I had to go through and see all of those concept art and modeling and all of the just terrible, crazy, scary creatures. The person to blame for my nightmares is Jessie Lee. Hi, Jessie.
Hi, Nino. Thanks for having me.
It was actually a very exciting opportunity for me. I don't watch scary movies. I don't play scary games. So prepping for this one was especially traumatizing, yet exciting. For anyone who doesn't know Jessie, Jessie is currently a concept art director at Striking Distance, who recently released the Callisto Protocol. But prior to working on Callisto Protocol, who was a spiritual successor of Dead Space, Jessie also worked on Dead Space. And Jessie also worked at Sledgehammer on Nazi Zombies, Call of Duty version, and a bunch of other horror stuff. So, as you guys can see, we're going to have an amazing guest who's going to help us dive deep into the art of creating horror art. Wow, that was a long introduction. I've never done anything like that.
I appreciate the long introduction. No, that's all good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. So I have so many questions today. I probably start with, obviously, the Dead Space, right? How was it? I mean, did you guys know that game going to be such a success? Like, what do you feel made it such a success, especially from a perspective of concept art?
Well, yeah, I was a concept artist on Dead Space 1, and that was early in my career. I came from San Jose State University. Right out of the gate, I worked on a game called Layer, and then I was getting my portfolio out there to EA. They had some other projects in the works, and when I went to the studio, I saw this secret project they were doing, Dead Space, and it just blew me away. So I could already tell first day just walking by some of the concept art they were doing, it was going to be special. I could just tell they had a lot of the big guns, a lot of these well-known concept artists that I'd been looking at their work, and just really cool mood shots that helped give a visual for what they wanted to build. And I think the game was really early at that point, but I could just tell they had big things in store on that game.
And you were like, choose me, please choose me.
Yes. And I got my opportunity. I was so thankful. It was huge to jump into that game early in my career. And it was something I was really excited about, sci-fi and horror.
Well, now you're a concept art director, right? So looking from where you're at right now and like considering that Dead Space in various rating was like the top horror of all times, like what made it so special?
And I'll look at just like things that probably people pass up when they first think about it is the weapons were so cool. The weapons were like fun and satisfying. So there's a lot of game mechanics in that game. So I think a lot of it's really gameplay related, but I feel like, just the art team in general set this great environment, this great setting. The creatures were really fun. But when you put the game mechanics, being able to chop off the characters' limbs, and then they come after you without any legs and arms, and it was just super fun. I would just say the mix of all the elements.
So what do you think makes a good horror game?
What makes a good horror game? I mean, there's so many different genres of horror. I've happened to work on a lot of kind of narrative horror games, with Callisto Protocol. So I feel like just having a really engaging story, really getting into the characters and having like a really believable world. From our perspective, the art perspective, what we really want to capture is this believable world where players kind of forget that they're playing a game and they're just immersed. And so I think that just being immersed in a horror game is the biggest part, I think.
So you would put the game into like more real setting? Like how would you make it relatable?
Depending on what genre, because say you're working on kind of a campy, fun horror game, I think a lot of the Nazi zombie modes are usually a little bit more like fun horror, not really trying to scare you, just kind of happy, but scary at the same time. When we're talking about really trying to scare the audience, I've worked on a couple sci-fi horror games, and we don't go too far on the unbelievable sci-fi. It's kind of like if you think of Aliens, if you think of like Ridley Scott, how he's designed his movies.
Aliens would probably be the biggest inspiration for Dead Space, right?
That's a huge inspiration. The Thing. There's something very believable about the production design. The sets feel real. They're not too over the top sci-fi. So our sci-fi was, we were always trying to think of something futuristic, but then we'll have something very relatable, something that somebody recognizes. And that kind of helps ground the sci-fi part of it and helps people sort of just feel like they're there.
If I was a newbie and I was trying to create a relatable sci-fi, what would be the elements that you would put in the room?
We're putting more relatable items. I mean, even I'll put it this way: we did a lot of like signage. You could go really high tech on signage, but we kind of had signage, old school things like papers. Maybe in the future they're not printing on paper, right? But having papers around on desks, things that people relate to. It's just the little like props. And so when we would do one of the big things for our environment concepts, really, I tried to get like a lot of just amazing mood concept artists for specifically for like narrative style game with trying to tell this story and trying to get people immersed. These mood shots, they were all telling a story. So every shot told a story. We try to get so many like slices of life. So if it's an office, there's something that feels a little bit like modern day people can relate to, and we just throw in a lot of touches like that everywhere.
Well, speaking about the Nazi zombies, the creatures in the Nazi zombies are like, as you said, like fun, scary, hilarious, crazy. Like especially the creature with all the like the bolts inside like on their back that is in your portfolio, which I was like, what? Like tell me about the process of designing creatures for horror games using that piece as an example.
I mean, Nazi zombies had a different style than the other games, Dead Space and Callisto Protocol. Nazi zombies was interesting. There are a few movies that kind of stood out. One of them was Hellraiser. So we kind of took our zombie mode, opposed to the different zombie modes that Call of Duty has done. We tried to make it a little bit scarier, a little bit like darker, and something that Hellraiser had. I mean, it sounds horrible, but it kind of has this torture-y feel. The characters have like, they feel like they're tortured souls basically, and they
I'm not
have
gonna sleep tonight.
yeah, it's funny because I have two kind of grade school kids, and they just like the computer turns off if they accidentally walk in the room or whatever. So yeah, it's nightmare fuel. Even they had to work up to the poster on my wall there. I could only recently, they're just old enough for me to put that poster up. So Nazi zombies, I mean, there was a mix of elements. I mean, we did a lot of research of World War II items, and we actually went back further into World War One, just because some of these reference photos of World War One characters and technologies are kind of creepy. Like they had a lot of like weird masks that they would wear, different things that we kind of opened up that universe a little bit to like, hey, maybe they had parts that were laying around for 20 or 30 years, and just some of the weird masks and weird gear that people had in World War One kind of fit in as well. So it was just a big soup mix. We brought them all together, and it was a lot of fun. And obviously it's not just the concept artists, is art directors, the game designers. It's just a great collaboration with everybody, kind of brainstorming on these characters. So I had a lot of fun working on that.
Did you have any constraints or limitations within which you had to create characters to make sure that they have consistency across the board, or it was was there like a common theme going through all of them, or it was just like go wide, go broad, however creepy you want to be, like just create?
Well, I guess I'll talk about the Callisto protocol creatures. We had a common theme. They came from sort of like an infection that broke out. So there was a lot of like plausible body horror that we used. So meaning we would reference like real mutations in real world. And there's a lot of tough things to look at, right? But those kind of drew inspiration first off. And then from there, we could kind of imagine any amount of mutation that happens. So the limitations we had, we couldn't we would not turn this into an actual animal. It would not start to like look like a reptile or look like some kind of animal, but it could form. All these human parts could form something bigger and crazier. So that was sort of our limitations. It was fun to kind of work within that box.
I also feel like I should have worn pink for this for this episode, just to offset all the visuals that we're gonna be presenting while we're talking, because it's gonna be crazy.
This is so crazy.
What was the key things that you guys felt like was the biggest inspiration, and where you guys branched off far?
In early brainstorming meetings, we would openly discuss some Dead Space mechanics, and if we could get away with kind of like bringing some things over, if it made sense, how closely we would follow kind of the Dead Space pattern that a lot of people at Striking Distance were a big part of bringing that to life. So in a way, we felt a little bit of ownership of Dead Space, but at the same time, we had to take a fork in the road and make this game our own game. And so you'll see similarities. I mean, I think the viewer can see the similarities, especially like creatures being made up of human parts and that sort of thing. There's definitely a common thread. It's not fun to just repeat the same thing. So I think, being that we want to like create something new and special, that's where you veer off and do it something new and have fun making a new game.
I'm 100% with you on that. It's interesting that while the game itself received mixed reviews when it comes to gameplay, the art and the visuals were something that the entire internet, I remember when it was released, was just like raving about, that this is the scariest thing that they have played. How did you feel reading that? You were like, yay.
Yeah, we were really excited about the visuals and the designs we came up with, just everything, the world we built, from creatures to all the environments, the architecture, all the world. We were really proud of it. We did feel like we had something great for the fans. And, the game had some kinks to work out, when it released. And so we definitely like shifted the momentum once it was out and we fixed some of the kinks. And, but as far as like the art, we were just always from the beginning, we were very proud of what we, were able to come up with.
I was talking to one of my art directors when planning for this episode, and we're chatting, and he was like, I think this is the best game with a fantastic art direction, amazing lighting and mood, crazy attention to detail and design. He was playing for a few months, never understood the backlash and the complaints. It was pretty awesome to be running around and exploring stuff without annoying map. And yeah, it was fantastic and scary as hell. And just like reading that, it was just like, yeah.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I mean, we definitely had our fans that were excited about it. We did our part. I directed the concept art, and our art director Dimitris Leal did an awesome job. With the whole project. We were just happy to be a part of it and helping with that vision.
Let's dive in the not having annoying maps. So like it seemed like environments was a big portion what the players enjoyed the most. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the creation of the environments for horror games, the pipeline, the tricks, the tips, what worked for you guys, what didn't?
I would say, I mean, the same with characters. It's a huge collaborative process. So a big part of it is letting the game designers, letting the narrative department, do their thing, being step by step with them, and knowing what works best, what they're really trying to accomplish, and then listening. Being a good listener is kind of a big part of being a good art director, is being a good listener, knowing what the clients want.
Did you have a location that you were majorly proud of? Like, what do you feel like is the most special one, and why?
I'm so proud of all of them. It's hard to choose. I really like the outdoor settings. So I feel like we really captured a creepy mood of the planet, just setting up what the planet was like. There's also an area where we go to this kind of inner city place. We called it Europa. It's this different setting. I thought we got a totally different vibe in that setting than the rest of because most of the game is in this prison. It's on Callisto, and then we do these flashbacks to Europa, and that setting is totally new, and that was a lot of fun.
Did you guys divide the team into two different parts, like the one that was focused more on the industrial parts, like the buildings and stuff, and the other on the the planet, the outdoors, or it was everybody on everything?
Within my team, I mean, for this project, I had a lot of concept artists, and sometimes somebody had a momentum going on a certain level, and so you just let them work on that level. Like there was the water level, it's kind of the sewagey area, and some people just had a flow on that, and we let them go for a while on that. The other side of that, I really like seeing a lot of people's perspective, and everybody was really cool about getting their idea in and, comparing it with other people's ideas, and working on top of each other's work, kind of building off of the momentum that somebody started. Somebody else would come in and, maybe add more detail so we kind of mixed and matched the parts of our team to build everything basically.
Was there any pillars within which you guys had to create the outdoor environments versus industrial environments to make sure that doesn't matter who is the artist working on this, they're still maintain the consistency of the vibe and everything about the game?
Yeah, absolutely. We had architectural pillars. There's a few main things that we referenced. One of the really cool ones that we found this style called bowalism, and it's basically in buildings where the insides of a building are kind of on the outside. So we see all the ducts. We see a lot of the things that are usually hidden within walls and that sort of thing. They're out on the outside, and it's really to conserve space and that sort of thing. But it kind of goes with the theme of our creatures where we have all these like veiny, gross things growing off our creatures. Well, it's cool. Like our architecture also had a little bit of this wildness. And that was one of my favorite aspects of our architectural pillars. We also looked at German Romanesque for these big like buttresses. There's different things that we used on like the prison, outside of the prison, and sort of our outdoor architecture. We looked at German Romanesque, just the buttress, like the heavy shapes, kind of felt right and heavy.
So heavy.
How does it happen? Like somebody comes in the office and like, hey, I'm thinking that German Romanesque is the thing.
So look, I'm not claiming these are all of my ideas. I was at the table of like throwing in art direction type of suggestions. CEO at the time was Glenn Schofield. He came up with a lot of them as well. He's very hands-on.
I've met him personally, and I every time I see him at a conference, he would be just drawing this crazy creatures. I'm like, a CEO that is an artist?
I've worked on 3 projects with him now. Just having him come from this art background, it was very important to him. So, I definitely followed him to a few of these studios, and yeah, it was good. And we have the same kind of great collaboration now. We check our egos. That's a big thing. We get in these meetings with different people that have ideas, and it's just have a great conversation, and it's not really like a fight to like have your idea heard. A lot of times you'll hear something new, like again, like the German Romanesque. I think that came from Glenn. He just threw it out there, and then it was our way of like, how do we interpret that? He was just throwing something out there. That's sort of how some of these ideas come together.
So the process is there's like a melting pot, and people throw ideas, and then you take it out and then you prototype it, and then like we see what sticks.
A little bit. I mean, we really heavily used concept to kind of put a vision to it. I had working on the prison as a guy named Boris Turano, super awesome concept artist, did these really fast, like mood, architectural type of images. So we would get a new image every day, and it was like ready to go, ready to look at it. And it was super fast and easy to kind of get a sense of, hey, is this what our look is? We would use concept art to really get a really quick vision, and just cycle through different ideas.
Love it. Also, you just created unrealistic expectation for the entire industry to expect concept art being in one day. Like, there's a few artists in the world that can do that. Majority of the rest take 10 to 12. So.
Oh yeah. No, I'd have to say on Callisto Protocol, the concept artists we were able to bring in were just incredibly special. Some of these, so the guy I described, Boris, shout out to you, Boris, great guy. Amazing, fast, and just excellent skills.
Yay, more of Boris in our life. Let's go back to characters and creatures. The scariest part. The animations there also make me like cringe. There's several characters in your portfolio, the Big Mouth and many others. How did you design them?
So this Big Mouth character was somebody our CEO wanted to do, and he had this idea, and we had a few iterations of it before. Again, I was kind of like looking at these different mutations that were happening, and I try to remember the name. I think it's called hyperdontia, is where people's teeth, it's almost like they have rows of teeth, and it's out of control how many teeth they're growing out of their mouth, and they're coming out in different places. And that was kind of a big thing with this Big Mouth guy. We had other concept artists going, working on creatures. I was throwing my hat in the ring, so to say. So I was at the same time that they were doing things and I was helping give them feedback and everything, I was also thinking of ideas, and not only just ideas with concept, but like pulling together references and kind of helping us find out what our rules were of our creatures. So essentially like finding reference. Okay, hey, we're not this. This is too fantasy. Hey, we're not this. This is too whatever, So trying to find like where our creatures landed. Our character director, he was also, sculpting things, just getting ideas, and sometimes we would kind of like tag team on a project. Like I would just send him a sketch and he would start sculpting it, or vice versa. He'd have a sculpt and I would just start painting a different idea on top, almost like just kind of building on each other's. And that's part of what I had said earlier, like having no ego, just kind of like brainstorming together and kind of like, okay, it's almost like a relay race, right? You took the first lap and now I'm going to take the second lap, but then I'm going to hand it back to you. And so we did a lot of this back and forth.
How long does it take you to create those creatures?
For the creatures, I mean, it just depends what processes I use. So I'll go back to like the World War II, like the Nazi zombie stuff, because that was predominantly my role there, was creature design on that project. And some of them, I got to take a little longer, and so I would build them out in 3D. So I would do like sketches. It'd probably take a day to do sketches and just get really quick ideas, like a bunch of quick ideas. Start to talk with my teammates and kind of see what was resonating a little more, and then I would go into blocking them out in 3D with ZBrush. Just kind of a lot of the creatures there were just like multiplying limbs or different things like that. So you're just kind of mixing and matching the parts of these creatures, kind of getting a setup. I never went like too far with 3D, just something that I could start to draw over, and then I would paint kind of a mood image. And so when I did all those things, that would probably take a couple weeks. If I shortened it up, some of the times, I skipped the 3D step, and sometimes I would only have like a week, and I'd have to just, okay, I'm going to cut down this part of the process.
How would the part of 3D Sculpt help you overall? Would that be something that the 3D modeler used later on, so it would be easier? Like, what was the benefit of that pipeline?
For me, it was just a solid base to work over. I think there was one time I built a guy good enough, like sound enough to be able to pass him, and then they kind of fixed it up. I think there was one time when I did that, maybe once or twice, but the rest were just what we call just kit bashing, moving parts around and then sculpting on top of it.
But would it save you in drawing if you had the solid base in 3D, or would it just help your imagination? Like, what would be the purpose?
It's just easier to see in perspective. Like if you want to pose a character, or when you start to like some of these creatures that got really crazy with just multiple limbs and everything, just being able to see all of those in a 3D space and turn it around, maybe I think when you start a drawing, you're kind of locked into that pose until you like redo it. But with the 3D, you're building off of it, and then, hey, I don't like this camera angle, I can just turn it and then now I'm going to start my paint over.
Now that you're a concept art director, what are the key lessons of your career working in horror games you feel are the most important, and you're bringing in, driving your team and would recommend other people to consider? I
have a lot of principles that I just work with my team that work for me, and it's treating everybody the same, not like trying to play favorites, and also really just doing my best to get everybody to succeed. That's my goal, is like having everyone on the team succeed and doing their best work. And if I'm getting people moving on all cylinders, like just doing their best work, then I'm feeling successful and in what I'm doing. So
what about production wise? Any production tricks, things that people you're like, oh my God, if somebody told me like 10 years ago?
I think the way that we use multiple artists, some are really like fast idea people, really quick sketchers, using those people to kind of get out ideas. And then, just knowing the team, some people are really good finishers. And I think that's a little bit of my secret sauce, is just like using everybody to work on something and have everybody like enjoy that process of working on something together. It's not like one person's baby, you know what I mean? Like one design isn't any one person's baby. Like all the concepts that I've worked on have been either art directed by somebody else, or maybe we're a designer's or a narrative person's idea. It could come from anywhere. It can come from the CEO, it can come from anywhere in the studio. So you just got to know that like you're a part of it, and just do your best when it's your part. And so,
And if you would start another horror game, what are the things that you would avoid doing?
so one thing I would probably avoid on this on a new horror game is really jumping into ideas too soon. A lot of our enemy designs are, prototyped out these days. We have a much more collaborative process of prototyping things, making sure they're fun, seeing and really broad strokes first, not getting into the pores of the character, like the hyper detail too early, like getting the gist of things, the general idea, and then working into detail. So I think that's something I think we're always learning to do better. So I think our teams are getting better at that, actually.
Love it. What about environments? Anything that you would not do now, knowing that you did, and you're like, that didn't work.
I think the main thing is always validate, do we have time to build this? Does, thinking of all the things that you can do to save your sanity, like your team's sanity, as far as like reusing or using a part that can be kind of like skinned a different way. And, you can save on that sort of like resource by plan things smarter. I think we've always tried to do that, but I think we always get better and learn ways to do it faster and to be more efficient. So.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom about art of creating horror art. I definitely would need a few therapy sessions after planning and probably editing this episode, but I loved it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and hope to see you again.
Thank you, Nina. I appreciate having me on the podcast. It was a lot of fun.